She fired the gun and the sound split the air like thunder. My little girl screamed and collapsed on the grass, clutching her back. I dropped everything, rushing to her side, my hands shaking as I pressed against the wound. Blood, too much blood. My neighbors came running, but before anyone could even call for help, Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, stood there with the smoking pistol still in her hand. Her face twisted, not in shock, not in regret, but in arrogance. She was in my way, Karen snapped, waving the gun like she had every right to use it. I didn't even see her. I wanted to explode, but I forced myself to stay calm because if I lost control, she'd twist it against me like she always did. My daughter whimpered under my hand, her small voice trembling. "Daddy, it hurts." And all I could think was that this woman, this monster, had finally gone too far. The cops were already on their way. Karen had called them earlier, screaming that I was trespassing on my own property. And now, with my daughter bleeding out, I knew she was about to spin this entire nightmare into her own story. My neighbors whispered in disbelief, but Karen smirked and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's lying. He staged this. His brat ran into my line of fire." My jaw clenched. She thought she could rewrite the truth. She thought she could shoot a disabled child and walk away with her head high. But deep inside me, past the rage and the panic, there was something else. Something Karen didn't know about me. Something she would soon regret waking up. The sirens cut through the night, flashing red and blue across the houses as the cruisers skidded to a stop. Karen immediately raised her hand like she was in charge, screaming, "Over here, officer! Arrest him before he hurts someone else." She still had the gun in her hand, pointing at me, but somehow acting like I was the threat. I kept my hands up, kneeling beside my daughter, my shirt soaked in her blood. "She shot my kid," I said, my voice breaking but steady enough to slice through her lies. "She aimed and fired at a disabled child." The officers hesitated. Karen, with her pearl necklace and fake sweet smile, started weaving her story. "She jumped in front of me. I was just defending myself. He's been harassing me for months, and now he's using his daughter to make me look bad." My neighbors erupted, shouting over her, some pointing at the cameras mounted on their porches. "We saw it. She aimed right at the girl," one man yelled. But Karen was relentless, stepping closer to the cops, lowering her voice to sound calm, collected. "Don't listen to them. This whole block has been against me ever since I took leadership of the HOA. They're conspiring against me." One of the officers started walking toward me, handcuffs ready, and Karen smiled like she had already won. That's when I pulled something from my pocket, a small black flash drive. I held it up, my voice sharp as glass. "Before you put those cuffs on me, you better watch this. Security footage from my cameras, live feed backed up on a private server." Karen froze. Her smile cracked for the first time. She didn't know that every inch of my property had been under surveillance since the first time she harassed us. And she sure didn't know who had helped me set it all up. Because while she thought I was just some struggling single dad, she had no idea my brother trained the FBI's cyber division. The officer stopped mid-step when I said those words, his eyes flicking from the flash drive to Karen's trembling hand, still clutching the gun. "Ma'am, put the weapon down," he ordered. For the first time all night, Karen's confidence cracked. She stammered, It was an accident. I didn't mean..." But her voice faltered as I slid the drive across the grass toward the closest officer. He picked it up and I added, "That's synced to my brother's server. You can watch it right now. Or he can send it directly to the FBI in less than 60 seconds. Your choice." Karen's jaw dropped. She started waving her arms, desperate. "This is ridiculous. He's making it all up. He doesn't have a brother in the FBI. He barely has a job." She laughed nervously, trying to win the crowd back. But every neighbor was glaring at her, some already recording with their phones. The second officer spoke into his radio, murmuring code words I recognized from my military days. He wasn't treating this like a petty neighborhood fight anymore. He was treating it like a federal case. I kept pressure on my daughter's wound, whispering to her, "Stay with me, baby. Daddy's here." Her small hand gripped mine, weak but determined. That strength, her strength, pushed me to keep steady. Then came the twist no one expected. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I pulled it out, a video call was already streaming. My brother's face filled the screen, his FBI badge flashing under the harsh office light. "Got the footage," he said loud enough for the officers to hear. "Crystal clear. Karen, you're going away for attempted murder." The crowd gasped. Karen went pale. her lips opening and closing like a fish out of water. For once, she had no words. And standing there, gun still in her trembling hand, she looked less like the queen of the HOA, and more like a criminal caught in the spotlight. Karen stumbled backward, her fake composure finally shattering as the officer stepped forward and shouted, "Drop the weapon now." The gun slipped from her shaking hands and hit the pavement with a dull clatter. All that arrogance, all that power she'd thrown around for years vanished in seconds. "I swear it was self-defense," she cried, tears streaking through her makeup. She ran in front of me. I didn't mean to. "Save it for the judge," the officer snapped, grabbing her wrists and locking the cuffs with a hard click. The neighbors erupted into cheers and shouts, some yelling, "Justice!" and "About time." It was the first time I'd ever seen this street united about anything. And it was against her. But even as she was being read her rights, Karen wasn't done. "You'll regret this," she screamed, twisting in the officer's grip. "My husband's on the city council. I'll ruin you. I'll ruin your daughter." That's when the ambulance pulled up, lights blinding the street. The paramedics rushed over, lifting my little girl carefully onto the stretcher. One of them asked me to ride along, but I shook my head. "I'll follow right behind. I just need 1 minute." I walked toward Karen as they pushed her into the back of the police cruiser. She caught my eyes, still spitting venom through the open door. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said quietly, leaning closer. "It's just starting," because she didn't know about the lawsuit already being drafted. She didn't know the HOA board was under investigation, and she definitely didn't know about the 37 complaints already on file with the state attorney's office. Tonight wasn't just her arrest. Tonight was the beginning of her empire crumbling from the inside. I turned away as they drove her off, the street echoing with the sound of neighbors clapping and shouting words like monster and criminal. And even though my hands were still trembling, and my heart was heavy with fear for my daughter, there was one thing I knew for sure. Karen's reign was over. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. I sat outside the operating room, my clothes stiff with dried blood, every tick of the clock stabbing deeper into my chest. Through the glass, I could see surgeons working on my little girl, her tiny frame surrounded by machines and wires. I clenched my fists, whispering a silent prayer, but rage burned under the surface. Karen had tried to destroy my family, and I wasn't about to let her walk away from it. The door opened and a doctor stepped out, his expression serious but calm. "She's stable for now." The bullet missed her spine by half an inch. If it had gone any deeper... His voice trailed off and I didn't need him to finish. I felt my knees weaken with relief. My daughter was alive, scarred but alive. Before I could thank him, a different man approached me. Dark suit, badge clipped at his belt. "Mr. Walker?" he asked. I nodded cautiously. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Special Agent Brooks, I'm here because of your brother. He sent us the footage. This isn't just about an HOA dispute anymore." My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He handed me a tablet, pressing play on a video. It was Karen, not just waving her gun, but talking into her phone minutes before the shooting. Her voice was sharp, cruel. "I don't care if she's disabled, I'll make an example of her. They all need to learn who's in charge here." The wall seemed to close in around me. She hadn't just snapped in the moment, she had planned it. She wanted to hurt my daughter to scare the whole neighborhood into obedience. Agent Brooks continued, "We've been watching Karen for months. Fraud, embezzlement, even impersonating officers. But this," he locked eyes with me, "this is attempted murder. And thanks to you, we finally have enough to bury her and everyone tied to her little empire." I exhaled slowly, my rage sharpening into something colder, more focused. "Then let's finish it," I said. "Let's take her whole empire down." And for the first time, I wasn't just a father protecting his child. I was a man about to dismantle the monster that had terrorized us all. They moved fast. Before dawn the next morning, black SUVs rolled up and agents poured out like a storm, slips of paper in hand and steel in their faces. I watched from the curb as men in plain clothes and suits went door to door, serving subpoenas, hauling boxes of paperwork, and opening safes in the HOA office. Neighbors crowded the sidewalks, eyes wide, whispering as names were read aloud. Treasurer, secretary, one of the board members who used to smile at block parties. Agent Brooks walked straight into the office and pulled down folders stuffed with checks, invoices, and pages of forged signatures. It looked like a paper trail made by someone who thought they were smarter than the law. "You people ran this place like a private bank," Brooks said to the camera crews that had shown up, voice low but steady. He pointed to a ledger. Redirected community dues to personal accounts. Fake liens on houses to force sales. Bribed a few city officials to look the other way. The words landed heavy. I felt sick, but also something like cold satisfaction. Karen had always crowed about keeping the neighborhood clean, but behind that polish were stolen fees and threats hidden under legal-looking envelopes. As agents drew lines between bank transfers and names, whispers turned into gasps. Karen's husband, yes, the councilman she'd yelled about, was on a list. He wasn't just a name. He was the one who signed off on emergency permits that let a developer clear lots at night. The same developer who had quietly bought up properties where families had been bullied into selling. The camera caught his face when they showed the wire transfers. He tried to shout his innocence, but the evidence on the screen left no room for his usual bluster. Then came the twist that knocked the breath out of me. Buried inside a stack of HOA paperwork was a scanned deed from the 1970s that had never been properly filed. A deed in my family's name that extended beyond the fenced lot everyone thought was mine. My father had paid for a strip of land years before any HOA existed. Someone had forged a later document to hide it. Agent Brooks handed the tablet to me and I watched the map light up, my name stamped on a parcel that changed everything. That meant the trespassing notices Karen slapped on my gate were built on lies. It meant the towing, the fines, the intimidation, all of it had zero legal ground. The neighborhood erupted, some crying with relief, others shaking with anger. My phone blew up with messages from neighbors I barely knew thanking me, offering help, bringing photos, old receipts, anything that could tie the web together. But even as the house of cards fell, Agent Brooks lowered his voice and walked up to me alone. He tapped a file on his tablet and said, "We found something else in their emails, something big. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and a name that connects this HOA to a string of similar schemes across the state." I braced myself. "Who?" I asked. He hesitated, then looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen. "The developer's name is tied to a political action fund that just donated heavily to a federal candidate. If that link holds, this goes from local corruption to a scandal that could shake up half the county." My head spun. We had taken down Karen's little throne, but the net reached farther than any of us thought. As agents escorted board members away and cameras followed every move, a cold fear crept in under my skin. Because this wasn't over. There were powerful people who had lost money and influence, and powerful people didn't go quietly. Agent Brooks clicked his pen and said quietly, almost to himself, "We'll need every witness to hold. And one more thing, there's a file with your name on it. You need to see it." I swallowed. The victory taste in my mouth turned bitter and sharp. Karen's arrest was only the first domino. The file was heavier than paper should feel. Brooks slid it across the table in the hospital waiting room while my daughter slept a few doors down, tubes and monitors beeping softly. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photos, my house, my truck, even my daughter's school. Angles only someone watching us closely could have taken. Karen hadn't just been harassing us. She'd been surveilling us like prey. "They had a private investigator tailing you," Brooks explained, his tone flat but edged with disgust. "Not just you, other families too. They wanted leverage. Anything that could be twisted into a violation or a threat." I flipped through page after page. Utility bills circled in red, notes about when I left for work, even medical records illegally pulled from somewhere. My stomach turned cold. They had built entire profiles on us. And then, at the bottom of the stack, I found a single sheet that made my blood run colder than ice. Primary target, Walker's daughter. Easiest point of pressure. I slammed the folder shut, my chest heaving. "They marked her," I whispered. "They actually marked her." Brooks leaned closer. "This wasn't random. Karen was reckless, sure, but someone higher up told her to make an example out of you. We think your land was the key. They needed it cleared, and you were standing in their way." I stared at him, disbelief giving way to a sharper, darker clarity. "So shooting my kid wasn't just Karen losing her temper?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it was a message." My fist clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. A message. They wanted me broken, scared into running. But they hadn't broken me, and they sure as hell hadn't scared me off. My daughter was alive. My neighbors were awake, and the truth was finally in daylight. Still, Brooks's voice cut through my fury with a warning. "You need to understand something. If this goes public, the people behind this won't stop at Karen. They'll come after you harder. They'll come after everyone. I leaned back, the fluorescent lights buzzing above us, and for the first time since the shot rang out in my yard, I smiled, a grim, razor-edged smile. Then let them come, I said, because they picked the wrong father and the wrong daughter. Brooks didn't smile back. He just closed the file and said quietly, "Then you better be ready, because this is about to go national." By the time the sun rose the next morning, the street outside my home looked like a war zone of cameras and microphones. Reporters elbowed each other for space. Neighbors waved signs that read "Justice for Walker's daughter," and satellite vans lined the block. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News outlets, lawyers, even strangers offering prayers and donations. The footage of Karen pulling the trigger had already hit national news. Every channel replayed it, a so-called HOA leader aiming at a disabled girl, then shrugging it off with, "I didn't see her." The clip went viral in hours, and Karen became the most hated woman in America overnight. Sponsors pulled out of events her councilman husband had backed, and his face was plastered across the evening news with one word stamped underneath: corrupt. But even as the country turned against her, Karen wasn't done. From inside county jail, she found a way to get a message out. A shaky video leaked online, her voice hissing like poison. I was set up. They're framing me because I stood for order. That child was never supposed to be there. This is bigger than you think. She smirked into the lens, even in shackles, and ended with, "I still have friends in high places." The neighborhood exploded with anger. Some said it was desperation. Others said it sounded like a threat. I knew it was both. Because an hour later, Brooks called me with his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. We intercepted chatter. Someone's trying to move Karen out of state custody. This isn't just her bluffing. They're pulling strings. I felt my blood go cold. "You mean, break her out? Or bury the evidence before she talks?" Brooks replied. "Either way, you and your daughter aren't safe. We're putting protection on you starting now." I looked through the hospital window where my little girl slept, her chest rising and falling peacefully. She had no idea her name was now tangled in something far larger than a neighborhood feud. I whispered to myself, half promise, half warning. They think this is over. But the real fight hasn't even begun. And as cameras outside shouted questions and the country demanded answers, I realized the truth. Karen wasn't the final boss. She was just the opening shot. Night fell heavy when it finally happened. The hospital was locked down under federal protection, but still, shadows moved outside. 2 SUVs circling slow, headlights cutting across the parking lot like predators scanning prey. Brooks and his team were already on edge. He leaned close and whispered, "This is it. They're making a move." I stood by my daughter's bed, her small hand curled around mine, and felt the weight of every moment leading to this. They wanted me afraid, hiding. Instead, I walked straight into the hall as the first window shattered. Armed men in black rushed in, faces covered, guns raised, but they didn't expect what was waiting. FBI agents burst from doorways, shouting commands, tackling them to the floor. A flashbang cracked, echoing down the corridor, leaving the intruders stunned and cuffed before they even had a chance to fire. Karen's plan had failed. Again. One of the men was dragged past me, muttering through gritted teeth, "You don't know who you're messing with." I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Neither did Karen." By morning, the entire operation was dismantled. Offshore accounts frozen, board members indicted, the councilman paraded in front of cameras with cuffs on his wrists. And Karen, once the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, sat pale and broken in a courtroom, facing charges that stretched longer than her manicured nails. Attempted murder, racketeering, conspiracy, fraud. She wasn't going home. Not this time. But the real moment came later, quiet and small. My daughter woke in her hospital bed, weak but smiling, and whispered, "Daddy, did we win?" I squeezed her hand, my throat tight. "We did more than win, sweetheart. We showed them no one gets to take our home, our land, or our lives from us." The crowd outside cheered when the verdict came days later. But for me, the victory wasn't about cameras or headlines. It was about her smile. It was about knowing she'd grow up free, safe, and unafraid. And as I looked out over the neighborhood, people hugging, flags flying, I knew this story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every American who'd ever been told to bow to corrupt power. Karen thought she owned us. But in the end, she reminded us of something stronger. We own our freedom and will fight to keep it.